we're following efforts to clean up the Chesapeake Bay so future generations can enjoy it for many more years to come.
Scientists explain that the best way to understand any organism is to understand its genetic blueprint. So they say that they've learned how it functions, including which genetic traits make crabs particularly successful at reproducing or adapting to their environment.
10,000 crabs, one dead river, and a result so unexpected that scientists are still arguing about what it means. In 2012, researchers released 10,000 juvenile blue crabs into water so toxic that nothing was supposed to survive. Critics called it a suicide mission. The crabs were given hours to live, maybe days if lucky. But something happened in that river that nobody can fully explain. Something that started small, then spiraled into a phenomenon now reshaping how we think about environmental disasters worldwide. By the end of this video, you'll see exactly what those crabs did, and why it has scientists questioning everything they thought they knew. The graveyard that nobody wanted to talk about. The Chesapeake Bay stretches 200 miles, covering nearly 4,500 square miles, bigger than Delaware. For centuries, watermen called it the Great Protein Factory. They hauled out 20 million bushels of oysters every single year. That's enough to fill the United States Capitol building twice over. This water sustained entire communities and generations of families for hundreds of years. But by 2012, that paradise had become a nightmare that nobody wanted to acknowledge. Billy Croxton's family worked these waters for 4 generations. His great-grandfather pulled crabs during the Depression, when times were desperate and the bay was the only thing keeping families fed. His grandfather did the same through World War II. His father raised an entire family on blue crab money alone, never imagining the abundance could actually end. But by 2010, Billy was watching his livelihood vanish before his eyes. Used to be, you couldn't motor 20 feet without hitting a crab pot, he told researchers. Now, I'm running empty traps for weeks at a time. Something's killing this bay, and nobody's telling us what it is. Here's what was killing it. And this is where the story gets truly disturbing. Over 150 rivers and streams drain into the Chesapeake from 6 different states: New York, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, and West Virginia. Everything that happens in those states eventually flows downstream into the bay. Every farm, every factory, every sewage treatment plant, and every suburban lawn drenched in chemical fertilizer dumps its waste right here. Starting in the 1950s, industrial farming pumped millions of pounds of nitrogen and phosphorus into the soil. Plants absorb maybe half. The rest flows straight into the bay without any filtration. And get this, when nitrogen and phosphorus hit water, they don't just disappear harmlessly. They act like super fuel for explosive algae growth. This is where it gets terrifying. Algae blooms sound harmless. Plants are good, right? Wrong. Dead wrong. When these massive blooms die off, they sink to the bottom and rot. That decomposition process sucks oxygen out of the water, like a powerful vacuum, creating conditions with less than 2 milligrams of oxygen per liter. Fish need at least 3 to survive, comfortably. Crabs need even more than that. Imagine being locked in a room where air is slowly pumped out. That's what every creature experienced daily, without any escape. The bay was suffocating, and nobody knew how to perform CPR on an ocean. By 2012, we'd lost 99% of the bay's oysters, its natural filters. The blue crab population collapsed by over 70%. The ecosystem was stuck in a death spiral nature couldn't fix alone. The water was too dirty for animals to survive, and because animals were gone, nobody was left to clean the water. It was a catch-22 of the worst kind. But one scientist was about to propose something that would make him either a hero or a laughingstock in the scientific community: designing the ultimate underwater soldier. Dr. Anson Hines from the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center wasn't interested in small fixes. He'd spent years watching traditional restoration efforts fail miserably. The textbook approach, clean the water first, then wait for animals to return, wasn't working. The bay kept getting worse. So Hines asked a question that made colleagues deeply uncomfortable. What if we reversed the order? What if we flooded the river with crabs and let them fix the ecosystem themselves? Dr. Rachel Summers, a marine biologist at the Virginia Institute of Marine Science, thought he'd completely lost his mind. "You're proposing animal cruelty disguised as science," she told him directly. You don't throw living creatures into toxic water and call it restoration. You call it a death sentence. The criticism was loud and immediate. Heinz was proposing to take 10,000 baby crabs, creatures with a notoriously low survival rates even in healthy water, and dump them into toxic sludge. Critics called it a waste of resources at best. At worst, it was deliberately sending animals to die for a publicity stunt. But here's the catch. Blue crabs are a keystone species. They're the janitors, security guards, and maintenance. Crew of the bay, all rolled into one. They eat dying fish and decomposing matter, recycling nutrients before they fuel algae blooms. They prey on species that would otherwise overpopulate and destabilize the food web. They churn sediment, aerating the soil and releasing trapped nutrients. The bay didn't just need crabs for food, it needed crabs for survival. And these weren't average crabs. These were lab-grown super soldiers, late juveniles raised in controlled hatcheries, fed perfect diets, protected from predators their entire lives, strong, healthy, and ready for war. The team chose the Lafayette River in Virginia, polluted but not total acid. It had decent salinity and a few remaining patches of underwater grass. Each crab was measured and tagged. If this failed, it would be public humiliation. Funding would vanish overnight. If you need to know what happened next, hit subscribe now. Because what these crabs did rewrote the rulebook on environmental restoration worldwide. The critics were ready to declare failure. They had no idea what the underwater cameras would reveal. The day the river woke up. June 2012. Dr. Heinz stood on a research vessel watching his team release 10,000 scrambling, clicking crabs into murky green water. The air hung thick and heavy, much like the water below. They sank into the gloom and disappeared within seconds. Then came the waiting. The silence was deafening. 3 days later, the first crab pot broke the surface. Inside, blue claws snapping aggressively, shells scurrying against wire mesh. They checked the tags with trembling fingers. Hatchery crabs, alive and feisty. The mood shifted from pessimistic to cautiously optimistic. But surviving the first week is one thing. Living long enough to make a difference is another entirely. Then in week 3, disaster struck without warning. Mortality spiked dramatically. The team pulled up dead crabs by dozens. They had lost nearly 40% in 72 hours. Dr. Heinz felt his throat tighten as the numbers came in. "I thought we'd failed," he admitted later. "I thought everyone who criticized me was absolutely right." Dr. Summers expected a call asking for help spinning the disaster. Instead, Heinz said 3 words: "Check the cameras." The underwater footage made the room go completely silent. The crabs weren't dying from pollution. They were dying from combat, vicious territorial battles over riverbed patches. The survivors weren't acting like lost tourists wandering aimlessly. They were acting like aggressive landlords who owned the place. It is not that simple, though. High mortality from fighting could still doom the project. If crabs kept killing each other, the population would collapse before reproducing. But nature had other plans entirely. The discovery that changed everything. 3 months after the release, Dr. Heinz was reviewing routine samples in the laboratory when his research assistant called him over with unusual urgency. "Dr. Heinz, you need to see this right now." In the shallow collection tray, swimming energetically among sediment and debris, were tiny crabs, smaller than a human thumbnail, brand new specimens. Definitely not the tagged crabs they had released months earlier. The room went quiet. Heinz picked up the tray with trembling hands. "These aren't ours." The released females had mated, their eggs hatched and survived, in water supposed to be a death sentence. Against all predictions, the next generation had arrived. Dr. Summers stood looking at baby crabs that shouldn't exist. "I was wrong," she finally said. "Completely wrong. These animals didn't just survive the pollution, they started a family in it. And get this, the water itself was changing. Sensors detected dissolved oxygen levels creeping up steadily. Organic sludge and sediment was decreasing. The crabs were eating it, consuming rotting material that would normally suffocate the river, devouring dead fish, decaying plants, algae clumps around the clock. They were literally eating the pollution. Because they constantly moved and dug into mud, they churned sediment, releasing trapped gases and allowing fresh oxygen to penetrate. They were tilling the riverbed like underwater farmers preparing soil for planting. 6 months later, underwater grass coverage jumped from 15% to 23%. A year later, over 30%. The crabs were eating algae-coating grass blades and blocking essential sunlight. More grass meant more oxygen. More oxygen meant healthier crabs. Healthier crabs meant more cleaning and more reproduction. The ecosystem wasn't just stabilizing, it was waking up from a coma. The domino effect nobody predicted. Scientists call it a trophic cascade, a domino effect rippling through the entire food chain. In the Lafayette River, dominoes were falling fast. Here's the deal. Before the release, unchecked populations of small fish and worms dominated the riverbed, stripping resources bare, without any predators. When blue crabs arrived, the bullies finally had competition. Small fish started hiding. Clams and worms had breathing room to recover. Why does this matter so much? Clams are nature's water filters. When their population rebounded because crabs were keeping their predators in check, the river's water filtration capacity actually doubled. Clearer water meant more sunlight reaching the bottom. More sunlight meant more grass could grow. Everything was connected in ways nobody had fully anticipated or understood. Then the big guns showed up. Rays, drumfish, even small sharks ventured into the Lafayette. The crabs had become food for larger predators, returning to waters they had abandoned years ago. You might think that's bad, but top-tier predators signal a healthy ecosystem. The food web was rebuilding itself from the bottom up. Billy Croxton noticed first. That season, I thought my traps were broken. Too heavy. Hadn't felt that weight in years. My father would have cried seeing it. By 2015, encouraged by the undeniable results, Virginia wildlife officials released 50,000 more crabs across 5 different sites throughout the bay. Results were remarkably consistent everywhere. Water quality improved measurably, grass beds expanded visibly, fish populations rebounded strongly. Maryland joined the effort in 2016. By 2020, over 500,000 carefully raised crabs had been released across the entire Chesapeake Bay system. Every metric improved: nitrogen levels, phosphorus concentrations, fish diversity. The science was settled. Active restoration worked faster than passive protection ever could. For decades, environmental scientists assumed only expensive technology could fix the ecological messes we created. Better filtration systems, bigger government budgets, more sophisticated machines. But the crabs taught us something profoundly humbling about our place in nature. We aren't the planet's heroic saviors riding to the rescue. We're simply the ones who carelessly broke it in the first place. The real repair crew was submerged in the muck all along, patiently waiting for a chance to do their work. Dr. Hines summarized the lesson perfectly. We didn't invent a clever new solution. We just finally stopped blocking the natural solution that already existed and had worked for millions of years. The Chesapeake Bay isn't magically fixed today. Dead zones still appear every summer. Pollution keeps flowing in from farms every time it rains heavily. 500,000 crabs can't completely counteract industrial-scale runoff from 6 states. But the crabs prove something remarkable, that ecosystems have a fighting spirit built into their very biology. They want to heal naturally. They just need a kickstart to break free from the death spiral. This revolutionary concept is now being applied globally with encouraging results. Sea otters for California's dying kelp forests. Fish reintroduction for Gulf of Mexico coral reefs. The Chesapeake experiment became the foundational blueprint for biological restoration worldwide. We don't always need to build expensive machines to fix damaged environments. Nature already built perfect biological machines over millions of years of evolution. Remarkable creatures with 10 legs, powerful snapping claws, and an insatiable appetite for dead fish and organic debris. If we can jumpstart a dead river using crabs, what are the actual limits of this approach? Could we deploy massive colonies of filter-feeding mollusks to clean up catastrophic oil spills? Could we reintroduce keystone species to accelerate Amazon rainforest reforestation? Is the answer to climate change and pollution swimming right under our noses this entire time? Tell us what you think in the comments below. And if you want more incredible stories about nature, fighting back in ways science still can't fully explain, hit like and subscribe right now. You absolutely don't want to miss what we uncover. Next,